This presentation is basically on a little review of sessions. I've gotten a bunch of questions recently about them. I'm going to go through a little bit more nuts and bolts, and then also how to integrate sessions with Ebuilder. So you may remember this slide from before, but sessions are cloud-based PDFs. You have a normal PDF, you can open it up in Acrobat, you can open it up in Bluebeam, you can open it up in Internet Explorer or whatever program you want, but sessions can only be opened up in Bluebeam. So it's a special feature of Bluebeam. They're really good in that multiple users can get in the same document. That's probably what we're going to be using it for most, is 30%, 60% final review plan, SSL, traffic, structures. Project managers can all get in the same document and they can all mark their comments. So this is going to be really helpful for a lot of stuff. They're not perfect. They limit some of the functionality. And I actually know for a fact that our project management group doesn't even have access to Bluebeam yet. So we need to get that straightened out. But once everyone has it, I think it's going to be really helpful for certain parts of our project. And I think the integration with Ebuilder is going to be really cool as well. So I'm going to do a little bit nuts and bolts, just simple about sessions. So I divided into two sections. A normal user that's just joining a session, what are the things that you would want to know? And then when you want to make your own session and invite other people, how do you do that? So there's basically two ways to join a session. One is someone can send you an invitation link. And then additionally, you can see the link right here. Also, there's an option that you can click join on a button. You can see right here, I have the session ID or session code. With this number, you can basically jump into any session if the person who made it allows you to do that. So two ways to get into a session. And I'll let you guys practice this if you guys want to log into Bluebeam Studio. I'll show you how to do this. And then, so yeah, another thing you want to be able to do, open documents. This seems really obvious, but it's actually not as intuitive as you would think. And then another thing that I think people should know how to do is change their status. This is going to be really good when we're reviewing documents. We can type in if we're done, if we're still reviewing, or if it's blank, then probably someone hasn't even opened the document yet. And then how to leave a session. There's a couple bonus pieces in here. You can send a specific comment to someone. You can also, there's a little chat box in there as well. Here's a session that I'm jumping into. Got to go to this little tab here, Bluebeam Studio. Hopefully everyone knows how to do this by now. If you don't, then feel free to ask me separately, but open up Bluebeam, this little session. You have to log in with your Bluebeam account. And then how do you join a session? So again, this little code right here, and I could have gone to this little plus box and typed in join, and I can just type in that same session ID. You just click on that code, and I'm pretty sure I have this one so that, and look, Gary's already in it. So, but if you guys want to jump in there, you can. And you can see he's actually in this document right here. So how do you open documents? So a session can house many, many documents. I believe they all have to be PDFs. I'm not 100% sure that's true, but I'm pretty sure that's true. And I basically put two documents in here. And you can see document 1, document 2. I can actually have multiple documents open up at the same time. There's a little status bar here. I can just say I'm reviewing. I'm not done my review. If I'm finished, this is going to be helpful for whoever's running the review to know what everyone's status is. And then the last thing I had on here was leave session. Seems a little bit obvious, but leaving the session, you can't be in more than one session at a time. So if you want to get into a different session, you have to leave the session you're in. Maybe I'll go through those couple of bonus things. So Gary, see where he is? He's made some comments here. Perfect. I'm going to make a comment for myself, just circled something, and I can right click on this and alert attendee. You tell Gary, I send him a little alert, and he'll get a little notification if I have something that I want him to look at. So that's a cool little trick you can do, and I can also type stuff in the chat. So how do you start a session? There's that same little box where you can join a session. You can also go into a new session as an option. And then we're also going to be able to create sessions in Ebuilder, which I think is going to be probably where we do our reviews. Adding documents to a session, you can add them when you first create the session, or you can add some later. Inviting members. There's basically two different ways to do this. In the very beginning, when you create a session, you can add email addresses. You can also create an email link, or you can send someone that 9-digit code and they'll be able to join. Changing permissions. This is actually something that's important to know because sometimes you set it up incorrectly. You can see I have the add documents as deny. So if I have this as allow, it's going to let someone else add documents. And you might want to have someone who has full control as well. And the last thing is finishing sessions. Finishing sessions essentially is, I would say for all intents and purposes, deleting the session out of the cloud. But there is a way to recover it, but it doesn't last forever. So I would say for all intents and purposes, when you're done with the session, you're not going to use it anymore. That's what we would call it, finishing the session. And so other kind of items I thought, so There's a few different states you can see here. I have them all active, suspended, archived, finalizing, deleted. Those are the different states a session can be in. In terms of what we're going to be working with, active, archived, and deleted are really the three that we should be talking about. And really, we should be talking about active or deleted. Something in a session goes into archive. If you've made sessions before, maybe you've gotten an email that says your session is archived. If it's sitting around for too long, it goes in that status, and then it eventually kicks into being deleted. There's a little bit of a glitch with Ebuilder that I'll talk about later, but basically when you finalize a session in Ebuilder, it goes into the archive state instead of deleted, which can create a little bit of a problem. Potentially, someone could be adding comments in and think that the session's still active when you have tried to close out the session, tried to close out the review. So that's one thing we need to work through. Another thing that I wanted to talk about was naming sessions. I think this is going to be really important that we name them in a consistent way, because if you have a bunch of them in your little Bluebeam studio bar and you can't tell which is which, it's going to be confusing. I really think it's going to be important to put the project number, and then I really like putting the due date on there. I think that's really helpful. If I had a bunch of sessions, it'd be really nice to know when they were due, if there's a review due by. And I also think it's going to be really important to put some denomination that it's an Ebuilder session, and I'll go into that a little bit later, but I really think we need to split up Ebuilder sessions and then sessions we create through Bluebeam, because they don't talk to each other as perfectly as you would like. There's a couple glitches that can come up if you do something incorrectly. So how do you start a session? So I already made one here, but I'll make a new one. So you click on this little add button, new session. I'm going to call this Bluebeam creating. This is where you might add documents. I'm going to add these guys. My desktop here, and then permissions, so I can change these later, but this is the initial permissions. I'm going to select add documents. That lets other people add documents. And I'm going to uncheck this one, restrict attendees by email address, because everyone I can invite or tell about this, I'm not worried about them just popping. And then this lets you forward this on to someone else. Again, you can change these later, but it's nice to set it up correctly. All right, so you can see the first thing that pops up is this user invitation. You can go to your address, you can type people in here. I can also just drop in tons of people's names. Another thing you can do, I can click on attendee access and copy this invitation. And I can just drop this in the chat or anywhere you want to put it. And this is going to be useful because we can put this into Ebuilder and as a comment, and then everyone can have the little, you can do request comment, and then everyone's gonna be able to have that link and they can just jump into the session. So everyone who clicked on that link, or Gary, should be able to jump in this session as well. See, Gary jumped in. Add documents. Okay, so how do I add more documents? If I want to do, I can just add a document. It's pretty easy. Inviting members, I already showed you that little plus box, or as I showed you before, you can copy people's links. I can also just send someone that little code and they'll be able to jump in the session with that little plus mark. Another cool thing is if you just right click on this, there's a copy session invitation option or copy session ID. So there's another way to get to that. Changing permissions, basically just hit the session setting under the permissions box. You can let people do this. I think the full control allows anyone to finalize the session, which you probably don't want to do that. You can basically get information about the session here. And then I think that's pretty much all I had. The last one was finishing a session. So the only person who's going to be able to finish a session typically is the person who created it, unless you give someone full control. So you just hit finish session, and it looks like Matt's in this as well. So I want to include the markups with everyone. And if you already have an existing file, you can overwrite it. I'm actually not going to save these files. I don't need to generate the report. So once I did it, it will disappear from my session bar, and I can, there's a backdoor way to get it back if you get desperate. So let me talk a little about Ebuilder and sessions. So I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but in Ebuilder, there is, I guess I'll just open up the main Ebuilder tab here. So it's a little bit buried, but if you go to some random project and under the Documents tab, gotta click on this again, you'll notice a little Bluebeam Studio button here. I don't know if any of you guys have noticed that. I think that's a relatively new thing, but basically what that allows you to do is create a session or look at past sessions. Now, something very important to remember about the Ebuilder integration is it's sort of a separate world than the other sessions. In my list of my sessions, stuff that I have not made through this Ebuilder type of session process is not going to show up. So those ones that I just made for this Bluebeam testing, those are not in here. You can see these ones are all archived. These are actually older sessions. So you have to think about the sessions in two different worlds. Ones you've made in Ebuilder and then ones you haven't. So that's good to wrap your brain around that a little bit. But I'm actually going to go ahead and make a new session here in Ebuilder and show you how to do it. So I'm just going to click on this, and you can actually see this little item is checked out. That basically means it's in a session. So just check mark and then Bluebeam Studio. You can see it's pulled that file in. I could put multiple files in. They all have to be PDFs. I'm going to call this TO. And I think putting something that denotes it's an Ebuilder session, EB or whatever. I'm going to call this 30% review, do 5, 10, 22. Got a week. So start sec. And at some point when you go into here, you're going to have to log into your Bluebeam account. I think because I've already done so, it doesn't make me do that. But then when I go into Bluebeam, it should show up in here. Sometimes it got to restart it. All right there. That's the one I did. And there's that document right there. So yeah, I could theoretically add more documents to this or do stuff like that, but it's not going to integrate well with Ebuilder when I then change it. So I'll show you briefly. If I open this up, add a comment or two, make some squigglies, and then I go back to my session right here, and I go to my sessions. Here's the one that I just made, checkbox, and I'm now going to do finalize session. You can see these 3 are active. So now it's finalizing. Basically what it's going to do, give it a second here, because that's 8 megabytes. It's taking a second. What we'll do is it will add a version 2 onto this plan set right here. I guess it was this one here. So version 2. And when I click on this, it's going to should have this little squigglies right here. So you can see there's the comments that I made. And so that's basically what's going to happen. We're all going to get a different version of the document that's going to have all the markups. So that's essentially how an Ebuilder session works. So Tim and I were talking about this a lot, and what we thought what a really good workflow would be for this is basically having set up a design review process. So you set up your 30 or 60% design or whatever. You add in those documents, those PDF documents, and this would be important to add your estimate as a PDF. And if you're doing specs or whatever, add that as a PDF as opposed to Word. And then what you do is you request comment and you put the link to the session in there. So we were showing before, and create that invitation URL. I guess I'll just walk through what we were thinking here. I think I actually already have one in here. Okay, here we go. So this is a process I already set up. This is a 30% design review. I'm just going to remove this. I'll just add a new one. I'm just going to drop in a new, save this. Okay, so now I've saved it in here. Now if I go to my attached documents and I checkbox this, I can now make a Bluebeam Studio session from here. And I'm going to call this TU, and this one do. And I don't want to restrict. So it's really important that we don't check this box because we want everyone in Ebuilder to be able to click on the link that we're going to create. So now I go back to Bluebeam, and here's the one I just made. So I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to copy session invitation. Now I'm going to go back to Ebuilder and go to comments, and I'm going to request comment. And now I can add whoever I want in there. I can copy in. I'll just put Tim in, for example, and I'll say respond by 6-1, request comment. So now that will show up in his court, and everyone's going to have that same thing in their court. So I think that process seems to work pretty well. I mean, logically, there's a couple tiny glitches in it I'm hoping we can fix, but I think that would be a really good workflow for Ebuilder pieces.